Hey everybody, my name's Harsh Patel. This video you're seeing here is part of my media project for my Islamophobia class, in which I will be analyzing Frank Miller's Holy Terror. During this analysis, I'll be using Chapter 7 of Todd Green's The Fear of Islam, 2nd edition, Jack G. Shaheen's Real Bad Arabs, and Evelyn Al-Sultani's Arabs and Muslims in Media After 9/11. Thank you all for watching. Before I start the analysis, I would like to give some background information on Holy Terror. Holy Terror is a comic book written by famous and infamous comic book writer Frank Miller and released in 2011. The comic was originally supposed to be a Batman story named Holy Terror Batman, which would follow Batman as he faced Al-Qaeda. However, it was rejected by DC for its blatant use of Islamophobic stereotypes. This led Miller to self-publish alongside Legendary Comics. The story follows a man named the Fixer, essentially Miller's substitute for Batman, as he works alongside a burglar named Natalie Stack, a substitute for Catwoman, to face Islamic terrorists invading their home of Empire City, aka Gotham City. Miller uses a similar art style to his famous series Sin City, but it is much cruder in quality. I am purely mentioning that as I'm using panels from the comic and they can get very uncomfortable to look at, so if you feel uncomfortable at any time, feel free to just look away. Green, starting on page 262 of The Fear of Islam, discusses the idea of the Hollywood Muslim, a simplified, monolithic view of Muslims that paints them as barbaric terrorists. These Hollywood Muslims are, to quote, terrorists and enemies bent on the destruction of the United States. Ultimately, this presents Muslims as caricatures dead set on committing violence rather than as complex characters or people. Now, to be clear, Holy Terror is not a movie, so drawing on these Hollywood connections and this idea of the Hollywood Muslim may seem strange. However, in its attempt to present a dramatic narrative of good guys versus terrorists, it borrows many elements from these Hollywood simplified portrayals of Islam. The terrorists are not presented with any sort of complexity. All the portrayals of Islam and Muslims in the story having some sort of connection to violence, explosions, nail bombs, weapons, beheadings. Really, all this does is proliferate the idea that Islam is a religion of violence and that all Muslims are inherently violent. It places Muslims as a monolith, keeping the idea that all of Islam is inherently anti-American and looking to destroy America when given the chance. Miller's use of the Hollywood Muslim here, present in Green's The Fear of Islam, primarily is used to proliferate Islamophobic ideas of Islam as a violent anti-American religion. In Real Bad Arabs, How Hollywood Vilifies People, Jack Shaheen discusses how Muslims are viewed as the cultural other. In viewing Muslims as this other, and thanks to derogatory characters in Hollywood media, Muslims have become public enemy number one, in Shaheen's words. Muslims have become a group that threatens the stability of Western civilizations, harming the sanctity of Christian and Jewish life in the West, and the advancement that comes with it through an inherent savageness that is often attributed to Islam. Holy Terror, despite its quite bigoted views, is quite diverse. It presents citizens of Empire City, the comics stand-in for New York and essentially America as a whole, as very diverse, as people of many different races and ethnicities. Got black people, white people, those of East Asian descent, those of South Asian descent, Latinos, many more. Even in the superhero community shown with the Fixer and Natalie, the only other superhero besides the openly Christian Fixer is a Jewish hero by the name of David, who, while shown as violent, is also shown as an ally of Empire City and someone who deserves to be there. Now, the people in the comic that are not shown to be part of Empire City are the Muslims. They're generally shown to be an outsider to the city, people looking to invade Empire City. There is only one Muslim character who's given more than a panel of dialogue, and that's used to talk about how different her home is from Empire City, and used to show a suicide bombing as a sort of invasion, as she disguises herself as a resident and ultimately attacks the city and its people. In this, Muslims are presented as an invading force, using disguises, guns, and moss as a way of creeping into Empire City, and ultimately the increased presence of Islam in the comic as the characters venture into a recently developed mosque is paralleled with the destruction of the city. As the greater the presence of Islam, the more sites of the destruction of the residents of Empire City, along with the destruction of their monuments, such as a parallel version of the Statue of Liberty found in the city. In Miller's portrayal of Muslims, one can see Shaheen's idea of Muslims being public enemy number one, being painted distinctively as outsiders. Through this portrayal, Miller defined Muslims as an other, making up a completely separate, savage entity that is an antithesis to the West. Evelyn Al-Sultani discusses the idea of simplified complex representations, where Muslim characters are made to circumvent the stereotypes around Muslims. These characters are made to be likable, complex characters who are able to be Americans as well as Muslims. However, in doing these representations, a false image of what Islam and Muslims are is presented. One of the most common uses of a simplified complex representation in the news relates to the presentation of women and veiling under Islam. Veils have been associated with an idea of repression as media outlets promote this idea of looking under the veil. The idea of looking under the veil was originally supposed to be to shine a light on Islam and provide perspective onto why Islamic terrorism exists and the issues that women face in some Islamic countries. However, it's led to this association between the veil and ideas of Islamic repression, misogyny, and terrorism, ultimately diluting the representation and distracting people from what is a more accurate and true representation. The veil in Holy Terror is similarly used as an object of repression and misogyny under this simplified complex representation of the veil. Towards the end of the comic, there's a scene where Natalie, the stand-in for Catwoman, has to wear what appears to be a niqab or a burqa, some sort of full-body veil, in order to infiltrate Empire City's mosque. She is almost immediately captured by terrorists and forced to talk to the leader, only able to fight back after taking off the veil. Miller's use of the veil is in line with Al-Sultani's discussion of the simplified complex representation of the veil as an object of oppression. It happens to trap Natalie under the control of the terrorists, with her only being able to fight back once she takes off the veil and shows herself, rather than being under the covering of the veil. Ultimately, Miller's portrayal of the veil as an object of Islamic repression follows with this idea of simplified complex representations and this idea of the veil as a repressive force that is presented in news outlets and that Al-Sultani comments on. In conclusion, Frank Miller's Holy Terror uses its narrative to peddle many Islamophobic ideas. Miller's use of what Todd Green calls the Hollywood Muslim leads him to present Muslims as a savage, anti-American monolith. Similarly, Miller falls in line with Shaheen's idea of Muslims being public enemy number one, being distinctly separate from the diverse Western world. Miller uses a simplified complex representation of the veil that Al-Sultani discusses to promote the idea of the veil being a repressive force, evoking similar messaging to news outlets who desire to look under the veil.